A couple of Jesus' disciples were coming to terms with the news that things were going to change. In fact, they were already changing around them. Jesus had just told them that he was no longer going to remain with them, but that he would be leaving them. Perhaps coming to terms with that news is not the right way to name this, though. These two disciples were reeling at the news. That kind of thing is the sort of thing that would leave one spinning out of control. The two disciples, Philip and Thomas, wanted something that could stabilize them. They needed to regain their sense of balance and composure, that things were no longer spinning out of control. Maybe our change is different, but we too are in the midst of dramatic seasons of change. Now, the facts of life are that we're always in the midst of change, no matter how hard we might try to fight it. That's just how life goes. But things are coming awfully quickly right now. I feel it in the broader church. I feel it in our congregation, even as I don't always know what words name it. And indeed, the broader world in which we find ourselves a part is changing rapidly. Technological advances, globalization, are forcing dramatic change at unfathomable speed. What comes next, we might ask? Will everything be okay? In times of change, we seek comfort. The two disciples sought comfort too, in any way that they could find it. And indeed, it's a natural thing when it feels like things are getting out of control to seek comfort in the places we can find it. And also, in the throes of anxiety and fear about what comes next, it's a point where it's awfully easy to lose the point. Philip and Thomas, the two disciples from our passage, they lost the point, at least for a moment. As Jesus informed them that he was about to leave them, Philip said to Jesus, "Well, just show us the way then. Tell us where you're going." Thomas said to Jesus, "Well, at least tell us what God is like. If you're not going to be here, that will at least satisfy us. We'll have some information that we need." But these two were looking for comfort in maps and details about the divine. When it feels like it's all falling apart, maybe those things will give us just enough to feel satisfied, enough to feel that comfort has been restored and everything's going to be okay. But Jesus didn't offer them a map, and he didn't give them a handful of details about what God is like. Instead, he offered something deeper. He offered them a relationship that would not end, a connection that would transcend any kind of separation that they might experience in him going away. Jesus said, "I am the way." There's your map. "I am the truth," an embodied presence of reality rather than a set of statements about God. "I am the life, and this will not end." I am the way, the truth, and the life. Notice what Jesus offers there and what he doesn't offer. He offers them movement, not a destination. He offers them truth, yes, but not in the form of a dogma or a set of propositions that we can just say, we can hold on to and say that we have certainty about the way things are. Instead, they have the presence of Jesus, truth embodied in flesh. And the life, abundance, as we heard from the Good Shepherd who speaks to us last week. Like Philip and Thomas in our passage, it's easy to respond to moments of fear and uncertainty by looking for assurances that come from the wrong places. Just give us a map and enough information about God, and we can stop worrying about all this stuff because we will be satisfied. But the quests of those two disciples who were reeling in their fears are too small. The way of knowing that they were seeking was too shallow. They come from a place of fear. They miss the point. And as we play out what happens when people of faith are driven by fear and overwhelmed by their uncertainty, I would suggest to you today that it's even dangerous. As our roundtable team met to discuss this passage, we recognized in some of our histories, in some of our pasts, that we had a common experience of Jesus' words, the ones we've heard here today, the ones where he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." A handful of us on the round table noted the way that these verses had been used in churches and in campus ministries to exclude rather than to welcome people in. The assumption being that Jesus is the only way, and if it's your way is not my way, then you're wrong. My truth. Life for my people, but maybe not yours if you're different than me. I hear in that kind of exclusion and the way of using Jesus in those ways emerges from a quest to assuage our fears with cheap forms of assurance that don't lead to assurance, nor do they lead to the kind of true comfort that Jesus offered Philip and Thomas. Let me just say it clearly today. Fear does not lead us to God. Thank you. In our time, in our country, white Christian nationalism is a clear example of a movement of people trying to build a life rooted and based upon fear. And rooted in fear, this movement that is both political and religious is threatening our democracy. It's threatening a very fragile balance of peace in the midst of our country. And what I care the most about, and those matter a lot, it's threatening the witness of the church in the world. Our Bishop Kanitha Bigham Sai convened a book with sections written by a handful of bishops entitled Building Beloved Community, the Courage to Love in the Face of Tyranny. I know some of you in this room and maybe joining with us online have been reading this book, some even together. I hope others will consider doing so too. In Building Beloved Community, Christian nationalism is recognized as a phenomenon that is not unique to the U.S. It's a phenomenon growing around the globe. At the center of it is a belief that a nation is founded by Christians and exists for Christians alone. And it often comes at the expense of excluding or marginalizing people who are of other faiths or people who have no faith. To prop up these nationalistic projects, Christian nationalism tells narratives that Christians are under siege by a movement of secularism, giving breath to the fears of the faithful. But as Lovett Weems, a Methodist scholar, puts it, this is a narrative that fails to match reality. One problem with this pervasive distortion of our faith that is playing out across the globe and is playing out in our own country is that it disregards the calling of our faith. As our bishop's good book goes on to name, white Christian nationalism teaches hatred and fear of immigrants. It doesn't have an answer to address poverty or systemic injustice or racism. It fails to honor women, who I would remind you both Jesus and Paul honored as leaders and as friends. Instead of freedom, these movements advocate theocracy. And as the book suggests, it replaces the God we know in Jesus with another God, and therefore, white Christian nationalism is a form of idolatry. But Jesus offers us a better way, a better truth, and a true kind of life, one that is not dictated by fear, but it remains open. It's the invitation of being with God. And the key word repeated in the passage we've heard today and the passage we will hear next week, it is the invitation to be in God. And that carries with it possibilities that fear cannot make possible. As Jesus assures Philip and Thomas, on the other side of fear, in the trust and the assurance of a God that they are in fellowship with, they will carry on the work of Jesus in the world. And when they pray, God will hear them and respond, because they pray through Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. My friends, our faith is never about the kind of satisfaction that we could find in containing God in a couple of facts. Nor is it about finding a map that has the destination to a place where we feel like we are secure. Our faith has always been about participating in the ongoing, unfolding life of God. And in seeking this, we find the promise of a true assurance. A place that God makes for us. And in Jesus, a true glimpse of the God who is love. Our passage started with these words: "Do not let your hearts be troubled." These are indeed uncertain times. And it's easy to grasp for assurance in the places that might feel easy, a map, a sense of satisfaction. But Jesus offers us more: the way, the truth, and the life. Thanks be to God. Amen.